Talkers, and this is News Recap. No fluff, straight to the point. Dallas rooftop attack leaves ICE detainees dead and raises new security fears. Trump threatens legal action against ABC over Kimmel return. Camp Mystic comeback divides grieving parents. Wrongfully convicted man awarded $25 million after 38 years in prison. 2 detainees were killed and another critically injured in a shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas early Wednesday morning. The suspected shooter, who fired from a rooftop of a nearby building, died from a self-inflicted gunshot. Authorities say no ICE officers were hurt. Investigators found anti-ICE messages scrawled on shell casings near the suspect's body. The shooter targeted an unmarked van transporting detainees to the ICE office. FBI called it an act of targeted violence.
This is the 3rd shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop. To every politician demanding that ICE agents be doxxed and calling for people to go after their families, stop. This has very real consequences.
The Dallas ICE facility is a short-term processing center where most detainees spend less than a day. Authorities say the shooter was a white male, though his identity has not yet been confirmed. The attack is the latest public targeted killing in the U.S. and comes just 2 weeks after conservative leader Charlie Kirk was killed by a rifle-wielding shooter on a roof. ICE isn't just making headlines in Texas, it's raising questions across the country. Newly released Bodycam footage from a September shooting in Illinois shows the agency may have misrepresented what happened. The video shows 38-year-old Silverio Villegas Gonzalez being shot by a federal ICE agent in Franklin Park after dropping his children at school and daycare. DHS said the agent fired because Villegas Gonzalez drove toward officers, but the footage shows him on the street bleeding while the agent's injuries appear minor. Surveillance also shows ICE agents leaning into his car windows as he drove away, suggesting he may have been trying to escape. Villegas Gonzalez later died in the hospital. The shooting happened during ICE's Operation Midway Blitz, leading Illinois Governor Pritzker and Mexican President Sheinbaum to call for a full review of the agency actions. Jimmy Kimmel is back on the air after nearly a week away, and he opened last night's show with a standing ovation and few jokes and very emotional turn. Kimmel said the last several days were rough, but not as rough as the family of Charlie Kirk. He told his audience he never meant to make light of the murder of a young man. Kimmel also praised Kirk's widow for publicly offering forgiveness, saying if anything good can come out of this tragedy, it should be that. The comedian also thanked his supporters, even those who don't like him, but defended his right to speak, including Senator Ted Cruz.
Our freedom to speak is what they admire most about this country. And that's something I'm embarrassed to say I took for granted until they pulled my friend Stephen off the air and tried to coerce the affiliates who run our show in the cities that you live in to take my show off the air. That's not legal. That's not American. That is un-American, and it is so dangerous.
Hours later, President Trump fired off a post on Truth Social blasting ABC's decision to reinstate Kimmel and hinting at legal action.
I can't believe ABC fake news gave Jimmy Kimmel his job back. Something happened between then and now, because his audience is gone, and his talent was never there. Why would they want someone back who does so poorly, who's not funny, and who puts the network in jeopardy by playing 99% positive Democrat garbage?
Trump added that Kimmel is yet another arm of the DNC, calling the network a true bunch of losers and saying, let Jimmy Kimmel rot in his bad ratings. Even with Kimmel back on the air, some affiliates continue to preempt the show. President Trump is changing his stance on the war in Ukraine, saying he now thinks Kyiv can take back all the land Russia has seized, including Crimea. This reverses his earlier position that Ukraine might have to give up some territory to end the war. Trump has gone back and forth between praising Russian President Vladimir Putin and criticizing him, while backing NATO support for Ukraine. Earlier this year, he sent Patriot missiles to Kiev and called out Putin. In previous months, he had talked about possible land swaps. Since Trump's Alaska talks with Putin, there's been no sign of progress. In the meantime, Russia has stepped up attacks on Ukraine and even violated NATO's airspace. Trump said NATO should shoot down Russian aircraft if needed and promised the U.S. would keep supplying weapons. He also criticized NATO members still buying Russian energy, calling it inexcusable. Zelensky said some European leaders, like Slovakia, might be ready to cut imports, while others, like Hungary, are not. President Trump's sudden shift on Ukraine didn't go unnoticed. Kremlin officials quickly dismissed his remarks, downplaying criticism of Russia's military and suggesting his push to stop European oil imports is more about boosting U.S. sales than helping Ukraine. State media ridiculed Trump's change in position, portraying him as unpredictable and theatrical. Moscow's irritation was clear. Trump's New York appearance with Zelensky and criticisms of Russia's long and senseless war directly challenged Kremlin narratives. Even with serious topics at the UN, Trump's speech was overshadowed by Escalator and Teleprompter problems. During his speech, Trump complained multiple times that the escalator carrying him and Melania had suddenly stopped. Shortly after, his teleprompter also malfunctioned. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt suggested on Fox News that UN staffers might have been trying to harm the president. Hours later, the truth came out. A White House videographer accidentally triggered a safety mechanism at the top of the escalator, designed to prevent injuries. The UN confirmed the escalator was not at fault and the teleprompter issue was unrelated. Despite that, some Republicans jumped to wild conclusions before the facts were known. Senator Mike Lee of Utah claimed the UN tried to embarrass Trump and suggested the malfunction was orchestrated, calling for the U.S. to defund the international body. And President Trump isn't the only one who ran into complications at the UN this week. French President Emmanuel Macron was stopped by police in New York while trying to cross the street on his way to France's diplomatic mission. The road was closed for a VIP motorcade, but Macron didn't miss a beat. He pulled out his phone and called U.S. President Donald Trump. "I'm waiting in the street because everything is frozen for you," apparently he told Trump. While officers apologized, Macron used the moment to discuss the situation in Gaza, planning a conversation with Trump and Qatar over the weekend. A few minutes later, the street reopened and Macron continued on his way. The same thing happened to Turkish President Recep Erdogan, who was stopped by police while crossing First Avenue. Unlike Macron, Erdogan didn't make a phone call. He simply waited for the street to reopen. After raising H-1B visa fees to $100,000, the Trump administration is changing the lottery system for foreign workers. The new rules give priority to higher paid and highly skilled employees. Companies would enter top earners 4 times in the lottery, while lower paid workers would only get 1 chance, boosting the odds for higher paid foreign employees. Officials say the changes will push companies to hire more Americans instead of relying on foreign labor. Some experts say U.S. workers, especially in tech, could see more job openings in the short term, but economists warn the long-term picture is more complicated. H-1B workers often bring skills that help companies grow, creating new jobs for Americans. Cutting those visas could slow business growth and limit overall employment. While some U.S. workers may benefit immediately, research shows the policy could hurt job opportunities and economic growth over time. Ryan Routh, accused of trying to assassinate President Donald Trump at a golf course last year, has been found guilty on all charges. After the verdict was read, he tried to stab himself in the neck, but authorities stopped him. Routh had represented himself at his federal trial in Fort Pierce, Florida, facing 5 charges, including attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate and assaulting a federal officer. Prosecutors say Routh created a sniper's nest near the 6th green of Trump International Golf Club, but never fired a shot. Evidence presented at trial included surveillance video, phone records, text messages, and testimony showing Routh stalked Trump and planned his alleged attack in detail. President Trump praised law enforcement on social media, calling Routh an evil man with an evil intention. Routh will be sentenced December 18th and faces the possibility of life in prison. Camp Mystic, the all-girls camp where 27 campers and counselors died in catastrophic floods in July, will partially reopen next summer. Families of victims, some critical of the camp's safety, received a letter from the owners. The July floods killed at least 136 people across the region. Fast rising waters struck before dawn on the 4th of July, and the camp did not evacuate. Questions remain about warnings from the National Weather Service and whether local leaders acted in time. Parents of victims have expressed anger and frustration. Some say reopening the camp feels like business as usual and that Camp Mystic failed their children. Families also say they were not consulted on the planned memorial for those who died. New state laws now require camps to create emergency plans, train staff, install warning systems, and avoid building in flood-prone areas. Camp leaders apologized for past communication failures and said they are working with experts on safety changes while respecting families' needs. A California man who spent 38 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit has been awarded $25 million in what his lawyers say is the largest wrongful conviction settlement in the state's history. Maurice Hastings, 72 years old, was convicted in 1983 of the sexual assault and murder of Roberta Weidemeyer. DNA testing later proved he was innocent, and prosecutors vacated his conviction in 2022. A judge officially declared him factually innocent last year. Hastings' lawsuit accused 2 Inglewood police officers and a Los Angeles district attorney investigator of framing him. Hastings said no amount of money could replace the 38-year loss, but that the settlement brings a long road to an end. The DNA that cleared Hastings was later matched to Kenneth Packnett, who had committed a separate violent crime and had items linking him to Weidemeyer's murder. Packnett died in prison in 2020. Hastings now lives in Southern Carolina and is active in his church. A Georgia inmate has been sentenced to 80 years in federal prison for building and mailing bombs to a federal courthouse in Anchorage, Alaska, and the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. David Cassidy, 57 years old, now going by Lena Summerlin, built the bombs while in Georgia State Prison. Summerlin pleaded guilty to 2 counts of attempted malicious use of explosive materials. The bombs were real and could have exploded. Summerlin admitted mailing them in protest over prison conditions. U.S. Attorney Brian Sterling said the devices were a threat to everyone who handled them, and a postal inspector said the intent was to scare the public. Defense lawyers noted Summerlin has severe anxiety and gender dysphoria, calling the crimes acts of desperation from years of abuse and hopelessness. Summerlin has been in Georgia prison since the early 90s for multiple convictions, including kidnapping and aggravated sodomy. Authorities said the long sentence reflects the serious danger posed to the public. And some good news, a 13-year-old girl from New York was found safe last weekend in Chicago suburb after being taken hundreds of miles away by 2 men. The girl disappeared from her Rochester home on September 11th. Surveillance video shows 3 men meeting her near the house and driving her more than 500 miles to Blue Island in Illinois. U.S. Marshals rescued her on September 20th from an apartment. She had been communicating online with an 18-year-old man who, along with his 49-year-old father, convinced her to leave. Both men are in the U.S. illegally. Authorities have not named the man or revealed the app used. Another teen girl was also found in the apartment. The two men are being held on immigration violations while formal charges are reviewed. Experts warn that predators often use social media to target children and urge parents to monitor their kids' apps and devices. A statue of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein holding hands appeared on the National Mall on Tuesday. The bronze figures, about 12 feet tall, were titled Best Friends Forever and stood near the U.S. Capitol. A plaque at the base read, "We celebrate the long-lasting bond between President Donald J. Trump and his closest friend, Jeffrey Epstein." Photos also showed quotes from a note Trump reportedly sent Epstein for his 50th birthday. The U.S. Park Police said the statue was removed early Wednesday because it didn't have a proper permit. The artist remains unknown. And that's all for now. The top stories of the day. No fluff, straight to the point. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop a comment. I'm Kat Pokras. I'll see you next time.